excited for today.
Awesome. I'm going to spotlight here, make sure everything's running, looking good. Okay, let's start bringing in the audience. Welcome. Admit all. Hey folks, welcome everyone. Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. Great to see you here today. It's going to be a fun episode. Thanks for joining us once again. I'm going to spotlight myself. I'm going to spotlight our wonderful guest, Tony. And we're just going to introduce, the program as we typically do. Just mention if you're out there on Facebook or YouTube, thank you for joining us. You do have the opportunity to jump into the Zoom call if you're witnessing this live. So please do join us. We will share the links on how to do that in the chats on YouTube and Facebook, and we welcome you. If you do want to sit on the sidelines and add a couple comments on YouTube or Facebook or question, we should be able to see those. A little bit less likely, but we do try to keep an eye on those as well. So feel free to engage remotely. If you do want to jump in the Zoom call, same thing. Or if you're live here right now, if you have comments or questions, raise your digital hand, write something in the chat. We're welcome to bring you on to have an audio or video part of the conversation if you're so inclined. We love that engagement, but no pressure. And if you are out on Facebook or YouTube, if you jump in the Zoom, it's you can interact a little bit more directly. This is Piano Tech Radio Hour. We will introduce the program momentarily. Just like to give people a chance to get settled. The digital participants, give them a chance to get settled in, and if we're out on the stream, give a chance for people to find us. But we will intro the program just about now, so you know exactly what you're getting yourself into. Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. We gather every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world, including manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, and makers of other instruments, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at a craft, to help each other, and to create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction for piano industry masters without leaving your home. You could find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. You could subscribe to this program, Piano Tech Radio Hour, just $16 a month. You would get direct access to each week's private Zoom call, as well as archival recordings of well over 200 episodes in our member area. You can join using the link bit.ly/join PTRH, bit.ly/join PTRH. And then, of course, just a few more call outs before we introduce our guest. You can check out our podcast, audio only versions of this program at pianotechradio.com. We just started releasing those again. We release archival recordings and also some of our more recent content while you're driving around, working in the shop, doing dishes. It's a great thing to listen to and learn something new. And then also check out our blog where we dive a little bit deeper into advanced topics that you would find in our private member area, where we have masterclass lectures on things like voicing, regulation, piano rebuilding and design, history of the piano action, all that kind of really choice content that you really can't find many places. We've got it all in one place. And our blog posts give you a little taste of it. We give you some really rich information, but a little piece of a larger lecture. If you like it, you can always subscribe and jump in. That's at Substack, pianotechniciansmasterclass.substack.com. Find us on all the social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. You can just search our name and you'll find us. All right, I would love to introduce our guest for the day. His name is Tony Briscoe. He's a dynamic force in the UK music scene, from mentoring Craig David and producing chart-topping hits like Rewind with the Artful Dodger, to composing music for David Attenborough's Life in Cold Blood. Tony's career is as diverse as it is impressive. His talents don't stop at music. He also holds a PhD in Structural Acoustics and has pioneered cutting-edge apps for musicians like Chordio, which we will discuss today. Can't wait to dive into his incredible journey from the recording studio to the classroom and hear his insights on the intersection of music, science, and technology. Tony, welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour.
Hi, Ethan. Thank you for having me. It's good to see you.
Absolutely. And it's fun to reach across the pond and shake your virtual hand here. Like as I mentioned in our previous conversation, I've got some friends over in the UK, but I actually haven't visited. So I have more and more excuses to kind of come over and mix and mingle. I like to start out the program just to give people that context about how your journey in music started. What's your story there? How early did it start? How quickly did it get serious?
Wow, that's a really good question, and that takes me right back actually to my very young age, being probably being a 10-year-old around a Jamaican family at home. So my dad and mum, are Jamaican, and they came across during the Windrush era to the UK. But I think what made them feel at home in the UK was the music. And it was very
Hmm.
much the thing back in those days. So we're talking about roughly, 1970s. And my dad actually knew Bob Marley and Eddie Grant. He was a music producer himself.
Wow.
So I actually thought everybody had music sound systems at home, So because we had loud, the music was played quite loud, but it was fantastic. We had a lot of reggae music going on. We had a lot of Jim Reeves and jazz music going on as well, all of that kind of stuff. So I think that was my early experience really of music and sort of getting into it and seeing my dad every now and again going into the studio and trying to, sort of get across some of these ideas to musicians. I had no idea what he was actually doing, to be honest, but it looked impressive at the time.
Wow, that's an amazing background. I mean, I've lived in New York. Chicago, maybe you see a little bit of this, but not as much. But there's a lot of like Jamaican culture in New York City. You can go and you can get the patties and the what do they call it? Like the sweet bread or something like
Oh
that.
yeah,
And
you
then
got sweet potatoes, you have you have your usual jerk chicken as well and rice and
oh man,
peas. That's a staple diet that keeps everybody going, especially during the winter over here.
yeah, yeah, the jerk chicken that you can find in New York City. Oh man, it's amazing. Um, Wonderful. That's a great background. Where did it take a pivot or take a direction where it became very serious for you? That music
Yeah,
was a
that's
direction for you. Yeah.
That's a really good question. So it kind of promulgated pretty much until I went to go to university. So I started late, pretty much. So I was very much the receiver of music. I would go around, watch gigs, watch concerts, go and see some of my friends. But it was really kind of as soon as I went to university to study at the time mathematical physics. So it wasn't even related to music at the
Hmm.
time because I always had a passion for physics and music at the same time. But physics, I think, at that time was really pulling my heart. So I just followed my heart rather than anything else. And while I was there, roughly when I was in my second year at university, I then picked up the bass. I thought, oh, this instrument looked great. I must get into this. So I learned the bass, then guitar. But then all of that then fell apart as soon as I went to visit a friend in New York and heard an amazing track on the radio, played by Harry Connick Jr. It was one of the Thelonious Monk tracks called "I Mean You." As soon as I
Oh,
heard
really?
that, it just threw me off guard, and I then from then on fell in love with the piano and thought, "Hey,
Wonderful.
I'm coming back to the UK now to study piano." And I was lucky at the time because fast forwarding from there, 2 years on, I then went to, while I was doing my PhD, there was a great jazz workshop running by this gentleman named Radin Verno. And he was running these fantastic workshops, and I decided to go along at first with the guitar, but then I moved on to the piano, and it wasn't looking back since. It was a great experience. So that's really how I got into the piano
Hmm.
and quickly afterwards got into playing gigs.
Hmm.
But then
Yeah.
things, yeah, yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I
I'll
was
go
going to
on.
say, while
Interrupt you.
being in then, because when I was doing my PhD, it was pretty much in Southampton, and that's where a scene began to blossom. I can certainly tell you a little bit about that because all sorts of things then happened, but it was really kind of because I knew the piano, I got introduced to a couple of young musicians, or actually young singers, who were all singing and rapping at the same time. They were both 14-year-old kids. One was
Hmm.
Craig David, and the other one was a guy named Aaron Soul.
Hmm.
And yeah, just jamming with them with the piano and them on vocals and stuff like that for a few years led to my opening into the music industry.
Hmm, amazing. Tell me more about. I want to go into detail about physics and music. I remember actually, it's interesting that you put those two things together. Ultimately, my I took a different path. But I remember putting those two words together. You know, when I first went to university, I started at the small university outside of Chicago. My major was physics, right?
Oh,
And
that's
and then ultimately I changed my major to jazz piano performance, and I went to a different university. But I often thought about those two things together, and yeah, am I going to be, kind of similar to what you're doing? Like, was I going to design, acoustics or something like that? So it's interesting to hear that you got into that domain.
It's
Um,
interesting you say that as well, Ethan, because I would say a good third of my cohort when I was learning physics were musicians. And so
hmm,
there seemed to be a very strong tie between people who study physics, I think, and, trying to like maybe learn about the questions of the universe, and then also with a deep, deep passion of what it is about music, which
hmm,
moves them. So perhaps
hmm.
there's something there about that kind of link.
Yeah. Any other interesting ways that piano's played a role in your journey in terms of just as a human, as a professional? Have you done much recording of the piano or anything else like that?
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, it's always been a great way also of just meeting people because
Hmm.
especially going into jazz, going into the style of jazz music. For me, it's almost like you can turn up in any kind of bar and then get into a conversation with somebody on an instrument, so to speak. It almost
Hmm.
feels like that, just like we're speaking at the moment, with
Hmm.
no prearranged words or anything like that. That's what I
Hmm.
feel like when I'm on the piano in, working with other musicians. And in many ways, that's how I got introduced to many, many interesting musicians. And some of that then opened the road for me within the music industry. So there was the Craig David thing, what happened before. But just before that, I was playing in a number of jazz bands as well. And those jazz bands, some of them were touring a bit, Later on, I ended up playing at Glastonbury a few times in a salsa band, which was good
Hmm.
fun.
Hmm.
They if you get a chance to go to these Glastonbury festivals, it's
Hmm.
wonderful because
Yeah.
everybody knows about what's going on in the main stage, but there's a
Hmm.
lot of other smaller tents going on there, and it's just a great experience. And you can pot around in many of these tents and find all sorts of music. And salsa music was one of the things I was playing in this band. It was actually a 15-piece band called Orchestre Montpellier. And yeah, we just had so much fun performing that at the Glastonbury Festival. And it was kind of like people were chilling out, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning and people just love that kind of music to dance to, I think.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I've played some salsa in my life. In my When I was in high school, I had an interesting opportunity. They had this kooky summer program for high school kids where they would actually give kids a compensation. You would actually get paid, and you
Hmm.
would have hours where you would, study some sort of craft. They call it Gallery 37. I don't know if it's still going on in Chicago, but they had it for all sorts of different arts. From music to visual arts to theater and things like that. But my part of the program was a salsa band. So early on, I
Ah,
started to learn salsa and get a little bit into that domain. We also had recently we had a wonderful musician, Steven Sandberg, on the podcast. He toured with David Byrne as a kind of a Latin and salsa pianist. It was fun talking to him about that kind of New York salsa scene is amazing, right?
oh yes. Yeah,
Get so
that's
much there.
incredible. Incredible.
All right, so another like huge overlap with the piano, of course, is the application that you've been building, Chordio.
Yeah,
Um,
can I say just before that, because I missed
yeah,
out
go ahead.
also a useful section, which was really also because I was in and around a lot of recording musicians, the piano really helped me listen to a lot of music and then figure out not only what sort of chords and from the music theory side of view what was going on, but being around music artists who wanted to make records, it
Hmm.
also enabled me to hear the various sounds which they were using, let's say, in a number of pop tracks. So at the time, R&B music was quite big in the UK. So this was around the year 2000. But also this burgeoning music called UK Garage, which was happening at the time as well. And I was right in the middle of that scene, in Southampton at the time. So this is when Craig David, Aaron Soul, and a few others, the Artful Dodgers, were really kind of beginning to um, happen. But Southampton is one of those places where it's not very well known in England. So
Hmm.
everyone knows of London and Edinburgh and most of the capitals, but Southampton, at least within the music scene, wasn't that well known. But while I was studying there, working with these musicians, I would be one of the few keyboard players to go into the recording studios and be able to sort of just play around with some of these kind of ideas. But then
Hmm.
in doing that sort of thing and trying to fuse, let's say, different musical styles together, it helped kind of spawn this whole new kind of musical genre, which was called UK Garage. And we were beginning to do a particular type of UK Garage, which began to resonate within not only the UK, but then it blew up around the world as well. And so one of those tracks was called Rewind, with Craig David, and
Hmm.
yeah, it was really really good fun. But again, it was due to the fact that playing a piano, being able to play keys and work with different kind of sounds and technologies around that, if you like, kind of
Hmm.
led down that path as well. So that was another thread which linked the piano.
Yeah, that's fun. I mean, I've had a bit of that experience, and it's always like a nice I don't know, facet of having skills and abilities like that, and especially in the music domain. And I don't know if it's exactly how it went down, but it sounds almost like it. It's like, hey, you played the keys, right? Come on, let's like come on in and like do this. And you're
Exactly.
like, oh wow, look where I found myself. This is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very much like that. And you just discover on, what while you're there just working. And at the time, we were also surrounded by DJs as well, who were pretty keen on making music. And it's not as easy as it is now. At the time, it was a bit cumbersome. You needed to have quite a lot of expensive equipment. But we were able to sort of pull together some bits and pieces together to produce this kind of music. And it began to resonate with people and indeed later on to the record labels, which was fun.
Um, should I share right now the Chordio site, or do you want to say a little bit about the app before we kind of talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, you can definitely share it, and
All
I
right, let
can
me share.
perhaps talk about it as well at the same time if you want.
Yeah, sure. Let me go over here. There that is. Share. So I'll make this dimensions a little bit different here. All right, you can see that, right?
Yep, that's
Okay,
perfect.
wonderful. All right, so yeah, here we are. This is cordio.co.uk, by the way. And if anybody's interested, you can visit this website and it looks like you can easily grab the apps for your various are you on it looks like you're primarily on Mac devices or are you on
Yes.
Android
So
yet?
yeah, so this is an app. This app is a passion project. So it came from during the lockdown for us. So this really kind of happened during about the 2020. I had an idea to create an app like this.
Okay.
But I never really had the time until we were locked down in the UK, and then we
Hmm.
couldn't really go anywhere. So I thought, yes, this is a great opportunity to keep my sanity and just work on a
Hmm.
passion project.
Hmm.
And so the problem space for me was when I often like listen to a track maybe on YouTube or go around on a gig and we might sort of jam a nice chord sequence. And I often would sort of just write down these chords on a piece of paper afterwards and then try to remember them by the time I get home. So
Hmm.
this app first kind of started with a motivation of putting chord progressions together so that I can save them all in one place.
Hmm.
But then I suddenly realized while making this app that it could do a lot more. So you can bring up chords on this app. So anything you play in real time, you can see the chords, the name of the chords will come up. You can also
Hmm.
see on a piano stave what voicings you're actually doing. You can
Hmm.
tap on that name and it will save a block of that chord. But not only that, it will also show you the various associated scales which works with that chord as well.
Hmm.
So that really became useful to me as not only someone who improvises on piano, but also someone who just wants to know a little bit more about music theory.
Yeah.
And then also realized that this was an excellent tool for online teaching, actually. So if you're not there and you're trying to demonstrate maybe something you're playing on piano, in real time, it will show you exactly what you're playing. But it would also show you some of the relationships between modes as well and all the other sort of theoretical stuff on a piano. And it works in a very interactive way. So hopefully whoever uses it can, intuit, if you like, how the music theory kind of works around chords and scales.
So
And there
this
you can
is
see, so it
yeah,
works
go
on a
ahead.
Mac, it works on the iPad, and it works on the iPhone for now. Because that's the kind of platform I learned how to code on pretty much was the Mac and the iPhone platform. Later on, I'll see, to make it onto an Android device. But for now, because it's only just me making this, I decided to make it on the Apple platform.
And are you saying you did you code this yourself entirely, or you kind of got
Yeah, so
started
I
and then
coded it from scratch. Yeah,
oh
so that
wow.
that was a weird story too, actually. Again, it was just like the piano and falling into the piano, not really knowing the journey I was going to end up doing. Um, it was around about 2010 when I was working for Apple, actually, as one of their kind of evangelists for Logic, one of the DAW softwares. I
Hmm.
remember seeing one of their programs crashing and seeing all these error codes. And again, it just struck my nerdy side of me to sort of wonder what it's like to code and learn how to code. So I went online and found some 16-year-old kid teaching really well how to code from scratch. And so I went through that course, and then later on, that led me then to go on to do a free Stanford University course online, and then it set me up to code this type of app. So it was really, really good.
That's amazing. Yeah. And are you still is it still something that you code yourself, or have you tried to bring in some other folks to for support, or it's still at the point where you can manage it?
No, I'm able to manage it myself at the moment. So it's been
Amazing.
quite good because it's quite stable. It's also providing a bit of a side income as well, which is great. So along with my music royalties, which I've acquired through other projects I've worked on in the past, this one has proved to be quite helpful too. And for me, it kind of shows in a way that app creativity is similar to me to music creativity. So it's just a different language. But for me, it's very similar. So whenever I'm creating apps, sometimes I'm thinking music, and then sometimes I'm thinking music. I'm thinking of the technical side of the process of making apps. So I think these do work on the same side of the brain when it comes to creativity.
And then I see here, so we're just scrolling through for if somebody's just listening to this, we're kind of scrolling through the website here, looking at the different versions, Mac OS, iPhone, iPad. And then I see at the top here it says chord packs. That sounds like an interesting concept. What does that mean to have a chord pack? Is this like an
Yeah.
extra, is this like an add-on that you purchase, or is it just kind of like, yeah, tell me what that is. What's a chord pack?
Yeah, so that's indeed a add-on you can purchase, or you can create your own chord packs actually. And these
Okay.
chord packs are basically in the form of different genres, if you like. So you've got the neo soul chord pack, you've got classical soul pack, you've got a jazz chord pack, and these
Okay.
comprise of hundreds of MIDI files really,
Hmm.
where you can learn how to play various voicings of either songs you might know of or various exercises around very familiar chord sequences. So
Hmm.
it's a great way of learning how to voice certain chords for particular genres, and also reuse some of those chord sequences for other things like your DAW. So you can drag and drop any of these chord sequences also to your DAW if you like as well. So you can start off an idea in Chordio, and then you can then drag it to your favorite DAW.
Wow, that's really cool. That's an awesome feature. And then I see you have lesson packs.
So the
Um,
lesson pack is like a play along session. So with these lesson packs, you can simply play the music. You can slow it down as slow as you like or speed it up, and you can see the music while it's playing. And you can just play along with a piece of music, whether it's classical or jazz. And what's useful about this as well, you can mute various sections as well. So you might have the piano play and you can mute the piano and just hear the bass and drums and then just play along with that as well at your own speed as well. So it's quite a nice way of learning in an interactive way.
And then I see one in a billion applications. Is this something that you've just begun in terms of doing other applications? How far along are you in sort of building more beyond what Chordio is? Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, great question. So if you look at if you're on the one in a billion website, which I can see you're on now, you can
Hmm.
see the genesis of the first apps I created. So if you scroll all the way down, you will see chart music, which was the very, very first app I ever created. And it's a very basic app, but it really kind of taught me the basics of how to code for both the iPhone platform and the Mac platform. And then if you start scrolling up, you see all these apps are kind of music related apps. So you've got Sonosync, which is a relaxation app.
Hmm.
So you can relax to the music of your heartbeat, your resting heartbeat. So that's the motto behind that one. And then if you scroll up again, you'll see
Let
writer's
me just,
session.
so when you say relax to the music of your resting heartbeat, is that detecting it on like your Apple Watch or something, or like, or is it, tell me more about how that works. I'm
Yeah,
curious.
so this will work to various BPM. So we kind of made this so that the music you're listening to can go into different sort of pitches, or I'd say tempos rather than a
Hmm.
pitch. So you can
Hmm.
change the tempo rather than a pitch. And
Hmm.
so one of the when we say resting heartbeat, often say that the heartbeat runs at about roughly about 60
Yes,
BPM.
right.
And so you kind of got the music here, which runs at that tempo, but then you
Got
can
it.
slowly increase those tempos, as it
Okay.
were, while not changing the pitch of the music.
Ah, okay. Very cool. And then writer session, getting
Yeah, so
off the
Writer
musical.
Session was the first really serious app I built. And that one has done quite well amongst the writing community, songwriters rather. And there it's got a built-in thesaurus, it's got a built-in dictionary as well. And it's got a built-in way of just recording various ideas as well. So it's kind of like your notepad with you anywhere you go to help you write songs.
Cool. Looks like you got to go back and integrate AI into that one.
Oh
That'll
yeah, for sure.
that'll take things pretty far. Um,
And in
yeah,
Chordio as well, I've got plenty of ideas in terms of building in AI in that as well.
yeah, wonderful. Very
And
cool.
that's the nice thing about working with these things. It's a bit like composition, where you start off with a very basic idea, and then as it moves on, you keep adding on more and more ideas in the form of features.
Yeah, this is. I'm trying to f figure out where you have all the time for this. But clearly, you've got some highly leveraged moments.
Well, I try. That's a really good question because it is tricky to partition the various your time. But I've been listening to this podcast called Deep Work and Deep
Oh yeah,
Life.
Cal Newport.
That's exactly the one, yeah.
Okay.
And that's helped me a lot in terms of allocating a deep amount of time or a segment of time to go
Hmm.
deep into a subject, which is not easy to do in this day and age, as you know. It's
No.
very easy to get distracted. But I found it very, very helpful in this instance to really kind of go into deep dives and really be kind of fairly disciplined with that. And also when it comes to composition, it's the same sort of philosophy too.
Tell me more about how you apply that. So, do you, of course, you can theorize about it and apply it sort of, here and there, or you can develop like a very rigorous system. Um, I'm curious, like, how rigorous have you been at applying that? It's like, oh, I'm deep work every day for 4 hours or whatever, or I've gotten into that and then sometimes I get out of it. How rigorous have you been with that
That's really
deep
good.
work concept?
That's a really good question. And I try to use as much kind of tools as I can to help me along the way to at least triage things as much as possible. One of the tools I use is this app called Things, which is
Hmm.
just basically a kind of to-do list app,
Okay.
but that enables me to sort of put up for each day all the things I have to just tick off as the low-hanging fruit, if you like. And but
Hmm.
I always then try to keep at least 2 hours within a day to section off, so I can almost go dark or monastic, if you like, sort of switch off all the notifications, so I can either be on the piano maybe, or practicing scales in the case of a musician, or just deep diving into learning how to code, or to be doing bug fixes within Codeland and all of that kind of stuff. So I see the two very, very
Mm.
similar sort of disciplines.
Yeah. And when you go in dark, what kind of methodologies do you use to make sure you stay in the dark as
Well,
opposed
yeah,
to
that is switching off all notifications,
okay.
and just trying to find a quiet place to do
Hmm.
work. So, for example, I mean, sometimes I work from home, but then sometimes I go to a library just because it's a place where everybody is kind of with an agreed kind of contract to sort of focus on
Right.
whatever they're doing, and so
Right.
it's a great environment to do that. So even though it's in a public place, these public libraries, there are also good places where you can give yourself permission, let's say, to focus on something for at least a couple of hours without being distracted.
Okay, now this is interesting because I have a friend in the UK and we've talked about libraries actually, and he has often been struck by how uh, what an established library system we have in the United States. You know, I'll tell him, oh, we've got this library. I go to the library, I can focus, I can do this. There's books, there's resources, all this stuff. And he's like, we don't really have that. So I'm actually curious. Do you do you have do you know something he doesn't about libraries, or do you just have maybe of academic libraries that you go to because of your institutional affiliations, or I want your perspective on the library system. This is sort of way off
That's the no,
topic and obscure, but what's your
that
perspective on the library system in the UK?
you're absolutely right. Sadly, very sadly, a lot of libraries have closed down in the UK, and these are the
Mm,
smaller libraries. But where I
mm,
live in North London, there is this massive library called the British Library, and that
mm.
is probably the biggest library in the one of the biggest libraries in the UK. And
Okay.
so it's only
Too
a
big to fail.
it's too big to fail. Absolutely. And it's got a lot of wonderful, wonderful books in there, actually. I mean, you can find books on pretty much everything about the world in those books. And sadly, when you go in there, you find less people reading books and mostly on their laptops, funny enough.
Sure.
And they make provisions for that kind of thing. But it's a beautiful space, and you do find it a very calming. It's like a meditative cathedral, if you like, of
Mm.
a place where you can just go in and you feel a vibe where you can just literally just pick up a book, or just put a podcast on and just listen for 2 hours without being bothered. But
I love
yeah,
it.
you're right. I mean, sadly, too many of these places now are closing down, particularly in the UK, and it's
Hmm.
very hard for the youngsters to find a library near them.
Mm. I want to talk sort of on the same topic about your involvement in academics, and of course, you're educated at the PhD level, but you're also, an educator. Tell us a little bit about what domains you're educating in and how you engage with your students.
Sure, yeah. So initially, I started educating within the scientific field because that was my background. So I did a PhD in structural acoustics, as you said earlier. And even before that, it was mathematical physics was my degree. And then I did a PhD in structural acoustics. So it was kind of a natural progression to go into places, institutions, higher education places, and going to teach acoustics. But while I was there, I found that there was a big need for people to teach music as well, and particularly music technology. And because of my previous experience in the past of creating records and having an opportunity to release records and work with the technologies associated with all of that, it was quite kind of natural for me to fall into that realm. But I've always kept the kind of technical side and the music side together because I think they are the same. Unfortunately, I see a lot of subjects where they try to divide the two out a lot. But in many ways, I wouldn't be surprised if a Mozart or a Bach was living today, that they would be really into some of this DAW electronic stuff as well, and not shying away from those possibilities, because they help leverage a lot of the musical ideas. So what I've been teaching recently has been music production. So things like your Logic or your Cubase or your Ableton Live. So I've been teaching a lot of that. Also, a lot of the hands-on old production techniques, like the ones you find from Quincy Jones. If you were
Mm,
to imagine a producer being like a film director with a bunch of
hmm
musicians in a big studio. So we'll
hmm
teach the traditional way as well. But then also fairly recently, I've been teaching game audio as well, which
Oh, yeah.
is a very, very fascinating subject because there the music is not like within a film where you know what's going to happen 2.5 minutes later, exactly what the character's going to do. You know, Ethan, you might be a character loitering around in a lovely space, and the music has got to react with your character literally at any
Mm,
time. So
mm,
the music is very responsive or interactive towards what the
mm.
character is doing. And it
Oh,
opens up a lot of possibilities in how music can work, not only in a game, but actually in life as well.
mm.
And I can see the future of technology with the music
Mhm.
following you around and adapting itself to
Sure.
wherever you go in the future, potentially like
Oh,
that,
that's
you know?
fascinating. Yeah, I haven't thought about that too much, but yeah, I've always found it interesting. You watch people, especially like in New York City, a place where there's so many people, and you're riding the subway, everybody's got headphones on and all this, and it is fascinating to think, how much people get to live in a world that is, determined by their music. So you get those headphones on and you get some really inspiring thing going on, and the world outside could just be like boring and droning or whatever, but you're in some zone where like everything's exciting and there's some purpose or there's some meaning going on. Um,
Absolutely. It's almost as if everyone has their personal soundtrack of their life.
yes.
And you could hear maybe a record which you haven't heard from when you were younger, and it could evoke all those emotions again from that time. So that's how powerful this kind of music is. And imagine that following you around throughout your life, and becoming
Yeah.
adaptive as well
Yes.
to your surroundings. That could be quite amazing.
Yes, you're making me imagine a very interesting scenario. I mean, let's just say I'm, like a startup entrepreneur, and it's the morning, and I've got some big meeting where I have to pitch some investors, and normally maybe it's just quiet, and I'm focused on preparing for my presentation, and then I go and I get in front of them. But what if, right? Like a soundtrack changes as I approach the pitch room, and then it starts to get intense and everything gets pumped up and you're ready to go and you're ready to do the pitch, right? It's fascinating. Or even I don't know if this is what you're imagining, but it feels like it's on the same
Yeah.
tone. It's like you're gonna ask him out on the date. You're gonna ask her out on the date, and then like the music is giving you the vibes or whatever to do whatever. Yeah, that's really interesting. I could
And
totally
and it's
see that. It's got to
interesting,
happen
and
at some point where
well,
like,
absolutely, because if
yeah.
I think very much now that we're living in a point of time where a lot of these touch points are there. So we have
Mhm.
our Apple EarPods Pro, for example, where it has built-in head tracking. So whenever you move your head to the side, if you have somebody in front of you, you can still, see them or hear them
Mhm.
at a particular position. So you have
Mhm.
that bit. And as you mentioned just earlier, we have AI now, which can keep track of what's going on around you, even be able to recognize who's in front of you and tell you who that person is. So it's
Mhm.
just a lot of the components are there now. And
Mhm.
it won't be surprising over time that these things will be with us all, I think. But it would be
Yeah.
interesting, therefore, how the music, how people then would respond to music as well, from that point. But I also believe that coming back to the piano, that with all this electronic and AI stuff which is out there at the moment, and a lot of the newer generations just going to be born into it, there is going to be a push for people to want to see someone live and actually there performing it, and having that connection, that kind of personal connection with a physical being in
Mm.
that room. And
Mm.
also something about the ephemeralness of that, where it's
Mm.
a not recording, it's
Yes.
something where you're only going to get that experience once in your life, and only when you're there, you're going to experience that.
Absolutely. Yeah. We just did this so I have a piano tuning business in New York City in addition to doing this kind of stuff. And what we did, this interesting experiment just this Monday, most recent Monday, where we brought together our piano tuning clients and our community. We had this event. We had 12 different folks doing various performances live on the spot, and different people coming in to network and hang out. And I thought about recording it. And then,
Wow.
and it was part of it was that it was complicated. There was already so many parts of the plan. Okay, we're going to set up recording equipment and get that right. And part of my decision not to record it was to say, you know what? Like, yeah, I mean, part of doing the event in the first place was exactly what we were talking about, getting people together in a space, having that human thing, having that ephemeral thing. But not recording it actually is kind of even a compliment to that, right? Like, you're
Yeah.
not gonna you're not gonna try to recreate it or live it again. You had to be there, you know?
There's something very premium or special about that kind of thing,
Yes.
I think, where if you have an agreement and everybody says, well, we're not going to record this, this is going to be something where we're all going to experience at this one time. And yeah, and I had another instant like that, a really kind of funny story to tell you, actually. This was one going back to Craig David when he was looking to get signed, and I was tasked to be the musical arranger at the time. So back then, we were going to the various record labels and playing tracks to them, but literally we had to perform to them up
Mm-hmm.
front. So there
Mm-hmm.
was one instance, I think it was with Sony, but I can't remember which of the labels, but I think it was Sony ATV at the time, where we performed three tracks, and then one of the A&Rs then asked for one more track, and we didn't have one. So given the time where we used to jam, because as I said, I mentored a lot many of these artists. So we just thought, okay, I'll just come up with some chord sequences, and Craig, you just come up with something on the fly. And we whispered it quickly, and then we performed it. And then afterwards, one of the A&R came up later and says, "Oh, can you send us a recording of that track? Because I really like it." We forgot it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally
No.
ephemeral. Totally
Yeah.
ephemeral.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's a cool story. I want to go back to the topic of structural acoustics. Now, you of course know a great deal about structural acoustics and what that means and all the details. And of course, just like with anything, I can sort of decide what that means based on the words. So I
Sure.
actually want to explore this a little bit because there may or may not be some applications in sort of the piano world and sort of the world of what we do. Let's explore it. So let me tell you my idea of what structural acoustics is, and then you tell me where I'm wrong or where I'm right or where we can go. So, clearly there's people in our audience that build pianos or design pianos or put these things together. And, clearly there's some very important aspects of that scenario that includes creating a structure, understanding its acoustics, being very intentional about it. You've got the soundboard of the piano, you've got the bridge of the piano, you've got the hammers and how they hit the strings and how they vibrate, and all these very interesting facets of a structure that creates something acoustic. And in continuation of the concept there, not in the digital domain, right? In the
Hmm.
physical domain. This is
Hmm.
physics, right?
Hmm.
And then, of course, I'm assuming that, of course, you didn't study, the structure of the piano. Probably a lot of what you're studying is maybe the external structure, like, okay, I'm in this room. How do I want the waves to bounce around? Or maybe I built these speakers, and how can I send the signals out so they interact in this special way? So tell me how much of what I'm talking about is what you talked about versus it's a totally different world.
I think you're spot on in many ways.
Okay.
So structural acoustic, because often you're absolutely right to ask, people think structure and acoustics, because often
Hmm.
people's association with acoustics is acoustic sound, like sound in a room and all of that. But
Hmm.
also sound travels very well in different mediums, like a piece of wood or even
Hmm.
underwater. And in
Hmm.
fact, it travels quite fast underwater.
Hmm.
And so wells, the various wells, they use that as a very useful means of communicating across the oceans, actually, because it's an
Hmm.
excellent propagator of acoustic waves, if you like.
Hmm.
And so going back to what you said about the piano, Yeah, the piano board, and the piano is a very complicated structural piece of instrument.
Hmm.
And in a way, structural acoustics can help in these departments. So, for example, rather than just miking up a piano, for example, with just acoustic using acoustic waves by having mics dangled around the piano, either close or far away in the room, you could literally put maybe like a piezoelectric device on the piano to pick up its vibration and translate that vibration into sound electronically, and therefore have another kind of visceral component you can pick up and listen to on that piece of structure. But I must say, structural acoustics, or structural acoustics rather, is very complicated and often lends itself to being quite empirical, in the sense that even though you can do some hard maths and calculations, at the end
Hmm.
of the day, it's very often you want to try out things, like try
Hmm.
out a good position of where this sensor might go onto your piano
Okay.
or other kind of instruments. But
Hmm.
why I found structural acoustics very fascinating, because it applies in music, but it also applies in everything else in life. So, in the department where I studied, which was the Institute of Sound and Vibration Research in Southampton University, um, we used it for looking at aircrafts, so fighter aircrafts, for example. They would move around and vibrate in a particular way. And if you're not careful, the wings can just fall off, so these kind of things and calculations are very, very important. Um, and so also you might find them in Formula One cars, when they're going around corners and all of that. If you're not careful, the vibration could work in such a way that you won't get any more steering. The steering will just totally give up on you. And
Mm-hmm.
so these are the kind of things we were investigating. And actually, one of the projects I worked on, which was I was quite passionate about at the time, because I think Lady Diana was also passionate about it at the time. And this was plastic mines underground. So one of the applications of some of the work I was doing was a way to detect plastic mines without using metal detectors. And so this was using a type of vibration, so not a pressure wave vibration, but one we called a shear wave vibration, to see if we could pick up where a mine is underground. Because unfortunately, around the world, there are still unexploded mines, in some
Mm-hmm.
precious places where there's
Mm-hmm.
nice land, and you have young kids, maybe playing around, and it could be quite
Right.
dangerous for them. So
Mm-hmm.
these kind of opportunities to use acoustic waves and structure waves, if you like, to
Mm-hmm.
detect things like this was also quite useful.
Mm-hmm.
So
All
you can
right.
see it's quite a wide range of applications there.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, and of course, when you do a PhD, I'm aware you get into some pretty obscure terrain, and I'm curious, you know, can you share what was your PhD thesis on, or some obscure paper that you published? Where did that go?
Yeah, it was pretty obscure. Well, actually, it had some
Here's
applications
here's
as
your
well.
opportunity to share the topic with somebody.
Yeah, okay.
Where did you
So
go?
you're one of the few podcasters to ask
Yeah,
this
yeah,
question,
let's
but
go there.
here you go, here you go. So basically it was looking at vibrations in a fluid filled pipe. So you might think,
Okay.
Tony, what's the application of wanting to know the vibrations in a pipe? Well,
Uh-huh.
actually, you find that particularly around the Middle East and many other countries, maybe even in Africa, where you
Mm.
have pipes underground, and then unfortunately something causes it to leak, and
Mm-hmm.
you may not see the puddle of where that leak is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So part of my PhD was to use a device where you can use on each end, where it would actually detect where that leak is actually coming from.
Mm.
And so this device was quite a clever device, where it was able to do all the kind of calculations on its own to
Mm.
find out where a potential leak is. And so this could be a leak in water, but it also can be an underground pipe carrying oil or something like that.
Sure.
So that was one of the applications for it. But as many things we find, it can have lots and lots of other applications as well. So it was a
Sure.
similar. Have you come across PZMs at all? Like piezoelectric devices for miking up a piano.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So this thing was in a form of a piezoelectric, but it was one which you can wrap around several times around a pipe to
Mm.
do this. So it has special properties by
Mm.
being able to do this. So
Mm.
that was
Oh,
my
so it's like
PhD.
detecting like magnetic fields or something, or
Yeah,
nothing?
particular sort of vibrational fields. Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So
So
that
yeah,
was it. That was
so
it.
what you've
I
described,
tried
you've
to explain it
described,
in layperson's terms as
sure.
much as possible
Yeah,
there.
sure. Yeah, what you've described in a couple of cases is interesting that I was thinking about acoustics in sort of studying how sound, behaves in environments or in specific devices. But you've just described at least two applications which use this sort of almost like that sonar type behavior that you can use with waveforms, right? Like you can use it as a tool for reconnaissance of information and detecting some sort of information and predicting what's going to come back from a certain signal and then detecting the differences and saying coming to some conclusion. So that's an interesting application of the field, which I didn't immediately come to mind.
And actually, to pick up on your point there, one of the projects we worked on was to literally record bat sounds and then literally detune a bat sound and then reverse engineer that as a potential signal to use for sending out there. So if you
Uh,
actually detuned a bat sound, it would not sound like a little pluck anymore, but it would
hmm,
sound like a buzz and it would have a
hmm,
particular shape. So we were
right.
kind of reverse engineering nature to see if we
Yeah.
could use nature, if you like, to help that sort of thing to detect other things, if you like, you know?
Hmm. Fascinating. All right, we're going way off the rails today, but I don't care. I think it's all very interesting. We're probably going to roll out here in a minute because we do like to keep the radio hour at about an hour. If people want to find out more about you, where would you suggest they go?
Yeah, so you definitely want to maybe go to tonybriscoe.com where you can
Okay.
find my website.
All
And if you
right.
want to find out more about the Chordio app, then go to chordio.co.uk. So Chordio spelt like a chord with an IO at the end and
Perfect.
.uk. And that will help you along your piano journey. And it's free of charge. But if you like it and you want to download some of those extra chord packs, then
Yep.
those packs you have to pay for, as well as having a very full version of Chordio. But
Okay, wonderful.
it's been doing quite well amongst my piano-related students.
Do you do, and there's no pressure or anything here, but do you do any of that thing where if somebody like tells a friend they get like a bonus or something, or are you not at that stage with this?
Not at that stage yet,
Okay,
but I'm thinking about incorporating something like that, maybe around Christmas, to put some also Christmas giveaways as well. So what's the
sure,
space as well for that?
sure. Yeah, because you've got, here you have, thousands of piano tuners. We have our live audience of, a handful, but thousands of piano tuners. They're all going to be talking to people who are studying piano and all that, right? On a daily basis, sometimes a handful of people every day, right? So you've got some potential evangelists here. Um, and there might be some interesting ways that our audience can, just use your app as a tool to engage with their clients as well. It's always fun to say, hey, have you heard of this? You're learning about the chords. Here's an interesting resource. So, um, I don't know if it's the exact direction that's most fruitful for you, but I can certainly see a lot of overlap here.
Oh, absolutely. I've found many of my teaching colleagues as well. I found it very useful for teaching, particularly when they try and explain what modes are as well and look at the relationship between modes of a piano. So you can just simply touch particular sections and it will just come up. So everything is kind of drag and droppable and interactive about that. And you can also see the intervals of every note you're playing in real time.
Wonderful. I'm going to check it out for sure. Definitely going to explore
Thank
that,
you.
and we'll continue the conversation. It's lovely to get to know you a little bit. I'll outro us here because it's the end of our time today. We'll have to continue the conversation later. We have reached the end of another musical journey here at Piano Tech Radio Hour. Thanks to Tony Briscoe for joining us today. As always, we're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. If you joined us today by signing up for this session individually, make your life more convenient. Subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour, just $16 a month. Get the recording of today's session in a member area, automatic registration for each week's new session. Sign up at bit.ly/join PTRH. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. Don't forget about the podcast, the blog on Substack, and to visit all our socials LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Thanks so much for joining us today, Tony, as well as our live studio audience. We always appreciate having you come back and be a part of the show. All right, until next time, we'll see you later.